Okay, so as college students, I'm sure throughout your career you've taken at least some science class, learned about Darwin and evolution. And so wouldn't it seem weird to you if your teacher said to you that there was a more complete answer than Darwin's theory, that we've known this all along, we just didn't tell you, and that it will fill in all the gaps that Darwin left behind? I think it would seem weird. Well, in Pennsylvania, this did happen in the Dover School District. They offered the theory of intelligent design, saying that it filled in the gaps that evolution could not, and that it was a more clear scientific theory than evolution. Well, my proposition is that intelligent design is not a scientific theory at all. First, I'll explain how intelligent design fails to be testable. Second, I will show how it fails to be demonstrated like a scientific theory. And lastly, I'll show how it appeals to a supernatural being. So, for those of you who don't really know a lot about intelligent design, the Discovery Institute, which is a conservative public policy U.S. think tank in Seattle, Washington, defines it as the idea that certain features of the universe and living things are best explained by an intelligent cause, not an undirected process such as natural selection. So a scientific theory, on the other hand, is defined as a well-substantiated explanation of some aspect of the natural world, based on a body of facts that have been repeatedly confirmed through observation and experiment. So that clearly contradicts my first point, which is intelligent design fails to be testable. So the National Academy of Sciences says that only testable methods of science are considered theories. Theories need to be testable in order to get new facts, find out points that are incorrect, and to develop on that. Intelligent design does not do this. There's no way to say, to prove that there's a God. There's no test for that. They believe in a creator who's infallible and gives you all the answers right there. You can't disprove it in any way. The National Academy of Sciences says that intelligent design cannot offer a hypothesis subject to change in light of new data, new interpretations, or demonstrations of error. This contrasts with science, where any hypothesis or theory always remains subject to the possibility of rejection or modification in the light of new knowledge. So my second point is that intelligent design is not demonstrated like a scientific theory. Real scientific theories are published in scientific journals and reviewed by people educated in that area. This does not happen with intelligent design. The American Association for the Advancement of Science says that no current research of intelligent design hypothesis at relevant society meetings is occurring, meaning that scientists are not even considering this a scientific theory. So if scientists don't consider it a scientific theory, why should we? Most scientists support evolution despite its gaps. The U.S. Supreme Court case, Kitzmiller versus Dover School Area District, was what I was referring to before with the teaching of intelligent design in schools. It ruled that creationism cannot be taught in public schools, and Judge Jones, who's a believer of intelligent design and creationism, says that in making this determination, we have addressed the seminal question of whether intelligent design is science. We have concluded that it is not. He also continued with, we should not resort to untestable alternative hypotheses grounded in religion into the science classroom or to misrepresent well-established scientific propositions. So my third point is that intelligent design also appeals to a supernatural being. As I mentioned before, the scientific theory is defined as a well-substantiated explanation of some aspect of the natural world, which means it cannot include supernatural phenomena. However, you cannot have intelligent design without a creator or a God, which is supernatural. The supernatural is defined by the National Academy of Science as that which can never be measured or observed. Without measurement or observation, there can be no evidence. For this reason, the National Academy of Science and other leading scientific institutions all reject intelligent design and similar appeals to the supernatural. So overall, I believe that intelligent design is not a scientific theory because you cannot test intelligent design, you cannot present or accept it as a theory, and you cannot have intelligent design without a supernatural being, all of which contradict what makes the idea a scientific theory. So with these facts and testimonies from scientific organizations, judges, and even believers in intelligent design, I hope you agree with me that intelligent design is not a scientific theory.
All right, the attention device is fine. We know what the subject's going to be. Your proposition is clearly stated, although you do have the negative phrasing in there, so you'd prefer to get rid of that, so it'll be clear. You have an excellent layout of what the supporting points are going to be, and as you get to each of those points, you signpost them very clearly. So listening to your speech, it's easy to follow the arguments, at least as far as the claims are going. Sometimes the evidence, I think, gets a little bit rushed through. You did a good job in explaining the differences between the scientific theory and what intelligent design is. I thought you had some good definitions at the beginning, and you established good evidence on the criteria for what makes something scientific. I didn't always see the same follow-through with evidence on why intelligent design doesn't fit that. It seemed sometimes that your arguments were a little bit conclusionary on those points. The absence, for instance, of scientific conventions or papers or any of those kinds of things on intelligent design seems to be a presupposition instead of some demonstration. I think there's a little bit of equivocation on the supernatural arguments. It's sort of a circular argument on the theory, but you explained it pretty clearly. You had a good example on the court ruling. Like I said, I thought you were very good on the information that establishes the criteria of what science is and how it's supposed to work. It did seem to me that you were rushing a little bit, that you could slow down to explain some of the claims that you're making, or that they would be a little bit easier to follow sometimes with the inferences that you're making if you gave us an example or an extra bit of explanation. I thought you had an excellent summary and exit line. So on all the organizational stuff, you're doing a killer job. On the evidence, I think you're doing a very, very solid job. There are a couple places where I think you need a little bit more evidence. I do think there are some presuppositions built into the argument that need a little more explanation, or I should say a little bit more follow-through. All right, thank you.